check it out. This was totally accidental. It did look more like a Black Panther when I put it on. Not much more, honestly. Actually, the temporary tattoos weren't the best quality. Alright, hello humans, my name is Dael Kingsmill and today we're talking about D&D. For people who don't know, over on my Twitter, my sister gave me this idea for a March Madness thing that I could do. Sometimes on this channel I do breakdowns of how I would run different monsters from D&D in a vague and evocative fashion. And my sister Ray said you could do a March Madness where you pit different D&D monsters up against each other, which was a great idea. So I went through the monster manual and I got 68 monsters from D&D and I put them all up in polls on Twitter and people voted. 4 winners, 4 finalists are going to be made into videos, but you know, it was the last day of March. So the videos are coming out in April, but I think it counts as March Madness because we did do the voting happened in March. The first of our March Madness winners, as you probably figured out based on the title, is the Displacer Beast. Big cat, 6 legs, displacement. I look at this beastie and I instantly want a session focused around this creature to be, I want it to feel like Muldoon hunting the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. Hunter hunted, kill or be killed. Tropical jungle, night encroaching. These are the vibes that I want. So let's see how we might go about that. I think you can get a solid session adventure out of this. Just a nice tight pit stop. I would probably frame it using like, oh, the people of this village outpost have been under constant attacks in the night by a local pride of Displacer Beasts. Every other night, someone is taken. Please, great adventurers, we need you to rid us of the Displacer Beast menace. Now, you'll notice the first thing I did there, I feel like the Displacer Beast, as written in the Monster Manual, is kind of inexplicably written as though it's meant to be a solo baddie. But I think if you're gonna do a big cat that isn't a tiger, really, you're missing out if you don't have a pride working together. Get that hunting lionesses vibe. Particularly if we're going for this real, oh, vicious hunter thing with the big cat. They describe the Displacer Beast in all the fluff text there. They're sort of saying, oh, it's this vicious killer, it hunts for sport. But there are a couple of things in the way that the stat block is put together that don't really reinforce that concept. So over the course of this video, I'm going to try and reinforce that concept. So, the people of this outpost are being hunted, and now it's up to you, the adventurers, to hunt the hunter. While the party's in town talking to NPCs, I would really probably milk some of that, ooh, be afraidness, emphasize that these creatures get stronger in the dark. We'll get back to that in a minute. Throw in the line, you are alive when they start to eat you, and see if anyone picks up that that's from Jurassic Park. It's just a very good line. Throughout this part, it's pretty standard, probably encourage the party to leave in the morning. They'll want as much daylight as they can to try and track down the Displacer Beasts and kill them before nighttime. I have reworked the Displacer Beast stat block a bit. It's very strength heavy, and apart from the displacement, it kind of you know, doesn't do anything interesting. So if the interesting thing is the displacement, right, then I want to change the emphasis from being sort of strength and hitting to sneaky. Faster pussycat kill kill. I've seen that movie. It's a weird movie. So partly because of that, and partly because, I mean, people who are familiar with my stuff probably know by now that I have kind of a thing with the way I homebrew where if something doesn't feel like it has to be magic, like it necessitates magic, then I kind of have a rule that I have to find a way to make it mundane instead. Not mundane like boring, but mundane like non-magical. And in my case, I decided maybe there's like a weird shimmer to its coat that means that when it's in shadows, when it's in dim light or in darkness, it makes it really hard to tell exactly where it is, what its orientation is. It's a little bit like dazzle paint on ships, right? So they've got that going for them. You might just decide that they're still magic, and that's totally fine. But I did kind of couple it with this idea of darkness. They're slinking through the dark. I mean, they're based on a Black Panther, you know? You've got them in the jungles, in the shadows, really using darkness to their advantage, creeping around, suddenly striking and killing. Plus, the other benefit of this is that it puts kind of a timer on the tracking phase of this session. You really want to try and find these creatures before sundown. Not because you won't be able to fight them after sundown, but because they will be much stronger after sundown. So now, aha, the meat of this session, I think, should be a tracking minigame. The thing with tracking in D&D is that it kind of is a one roll, succeed, oh good, you found the thing, right? Which wouldn't make a great session. So I, for the purposes of this, have devised a little way of kind of zooming in on the process of tracking and sort of, for characters who are good at it, still having it be like, look how good you are at tracking, but breaking it up into smaller pieces so that it feels more in depth and intricate and like clever and strategic. Let me just say, this was going to be a very different video until this idea came to me in a dream. I'm not saying it's divine, but as I stirred from my sleep this morning, I heard a voice in my mind, and the voice said the most beautiful words I've ever heard. And the words were, it's like Minesweeper. You know Minesweeper? It's got that little grid of squares, and you click on them, and it shows around the border of the area. It's like, well, this is touching 2 mines, and this is touching 3. And you know, that game, since waking up this morning, I have made a little tracking mini game that is like Minesweeper. And I think it's pretty good. So as preparation for this, the things that you're gonna need to do, make up a little grid of squares. For me, I've kept it simple, just 6 by 6. Pick a side that is designated to be closest to the village outpost. And since their last kill, the Displacers have gone back into the jungle. So you as the DM are going to trace a path that the Displacers have followed. I think a solid length for this path is 10 squares. Diagonals are okay, you don't have to do any of that, oh, it takes twice as long for a diagonal. You can only travel to adjacent squares, and you've got 10 squares worth of travel. Wherever you decide to end your path, that's where the Displacer beasts have, like, camped out for the night, or whatever the cat equivalent of camping is. Also, while you're here, I think it's worthwhile, the idea that these Displacer beasts have been plaguing this village for a while now. Take 2d6, roll them like 3 times, I think is a good number. Those squares have traps in them. The townspeople in the past have braved going into the jungle and setting traps in the hopes that they might catch the Displacer beasts. So here you go, you've got your A, B, C, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Plus, on your grid, you have your path that the Displacer beasts have taken, and you have your secret locations of traps. This is the copy that you keep behind the DM screen. It's battleships, it's Fury of Dracula, right? It's hidden movement elements. The players also get a grid, but their grid is blank. They have to work this stuff out as they go. Now, I've written out an example. I did sort of a test simulation with dice of how this would work to see if it actually would function. And this is how that example went. All right, so the first thing that your party are going to do is that they're going to roll a stealth check that will kind of apply to their general approach throughout the rest of this. They're going to be rolling enough things, I don't want them to also be rolling stealth checks every single turn. So instead of doing that, the team rolls a stealth check at the beginning before they head into the jungle. So my example party is made up of a ranger, a rogue, a fighter, and a wizard. Before beginning the hunt, each can make a dexterity stealth roll. If the character is proficient in survival or nature, then they may add their modifiers for one of those skills to their total, or they can add it to the total of another party member. So in this example, the stealth checks rolled, the ranger totaled 17, the rogue totaled 14, the fighter 11, and the wizard 8. The DC for this check is a 14. Chose that number because it's the passive perception of a panther in the monster manual. I don't really understand why the Displacer beast has so many stats that are worse than a panther. Seems strange to me. By the way, feel free to let the players know that the DC is 14. I think that just adds to the knowledge way up ahead of time that, oh, they're hunting you as well. You're going to be hunted. It'll seed that knowledge, which is always fun. Anyway, DC 14. So the fighter and the wizard are likely to be noticed fairly quickly based on their initial rolls. But of course, like any good ranger, the ranger is trained in survival. They have a +6. So they decide to spend their prep time helping the wizard out. They particularly focus their energy on the components pouch, which they think might have a lot of strange smells that will draw attention to themselves. So the ranger stuffs some pungent herbs into the components pouch to mask some of that scent a little bit better. So the ranger's +6 in survival is added to the wizard's total, which brings their total to 15. So that means that out of 4, this party has 3 successes. Those will become the number of successful perception checks that the Displacer beasts need to make before they fully realize that someone is encroaching into their territory. So the heroes are gonna get a little bit of a head start depending on how stealthy they are being. But again, it's that sort of ticking element. At some point, the Displacer beasts will notice that they're here. And when they notice, the game is on. Now, the party choose where to enter the jungle anywhere along the A column. I rolled a d6 to decide for the party, and they just happened to enter on A3, which you'll notice is exactly the same spot that I decided the Displacer Beast entered. So the Displacer Beasts pass through this square. So as long as anyone in the group is trained in survival, they get a freebie to realize that the beasts were here. They automatically recognize that as soon as they step into this space. Since it happened instantly, I would maybe describe this as the party following a trail of blood from the last victim, following the smear of blood on the leaves of ferns. But as they move deeper, that trail of blood dries up. Okay, they're in the jungle now. From here, the players can suggest different skills that they would like to use in order to try and track the Displacer Beasts, to follow in the wake of their quarry. The character chooses a direction in which to focus their search: north, south, east, or west. And the character makes a DC 16 check of their choosing. I went with DC 16 because the passive stealth of my version of the Displacer Beast, it would be 16. You can change that number if you want, but keep in mind that some failures in this minigame will be interesting. So I wouldn't make the DC too low. The character does have to be able to explain what they're doing to make that skill that they've chosen useful. However, this bit's a little bit like a skill challenge, right? So there are going to be some skills that are really obviously useful for this, like survival, to follow the footprints, but someone could suggest something unusual. Maybe a character would suggest that they want to make a medicine check to see where the blood is freshest, and they can try and extrapolate the pathing from there. I would avoid telling the players the exact DC for this particular thing, but yeah, basically for each successful check, the players unlock some information about each square in the grid attached to their chosen cardinal direction. So, for example, the ranger decides that they want to make a survival check to pick up the trail again, and they want to focus their attention on the east, where they're going to cover the most number of squares. So it basically would include any square that has that letter in it, right? So east covers northeast, east, and southeast squares. The ranger totaled a 22 on their check. They absolutely passed. The jungle is full of undergrowth plant life, and you can't see any disturbances that would match the weight or the size of a big cat like a Displacer Beast. Nothing is crushed or snapped in the way that you would expect. So after you take your time carefully surveying the area, you're pretty confident in saying that the Displacer Beasts didn't go through any of these 3 squares. So that was one check. The players can choose to make another check from this first square that they've entered, which will increase the information they have available, but it will take them longer to do so. And remember, they're on a countdown. If they left it a reasonable time in the morning, I'd say they have 10 hours before nightfall, right? They want to get it done before dusk. Now, each one of these squares represents 1 hour's worth of travel. And that covers a lot of stuff. It covers them taking the time to carefully track as they go, losing the trail, picking it up again, moving quietly, cutting your way through vines, picking your way carefully over rocks. All sorts of things go into that. So that's why traveling through each square takes an hour. Now, one skill check to keep tracking your quarry is automatically included in each square's worth of travel. That's already grouped in with the time that's taken. But every additional check adds another hour to the time taken. If the same person wants to make checks twice, every character has to have contributed a check before the same person can go again. So it can't just be the ranger going, oh, I made a survival check and now I'll make another one. No, the rangers had their turn, so now it's someone else's turn. Our party know not to head eastways at all if they want to keep the trail. They could make a guess and leave now in the direction of their choice without wasting any extra time, but they feel like they need more information. They figure it's still early in the day, can't hurt. The fighter makes an investigation check focused south of the party's position. 17. The fighter walks back to the last place that they had clear evidence, gets down low, and takes a look at the area from a kneeling view. Examining the undergrowth carefully, they can just barely discern a disturbance in the ferns, all bent ever so slightly to lean to the right. You take your time to be sure, but it's enough to convince you that they headed south. So the DM in this case marks 2 hours off the clock. And as the party are traveling, it's time for the Displacer Beasts to take their turn. At the moment, it's nothing too exciting. The Displacers are just rolling to see if they have noticed the incursion into their territory. I would probably announce what the roll is for, but not the result. For the DC, you might make it a 14, because that was the DC that the stealth checks the party made were against. Or I think it might work to make it the average of the party's total stealth roll results, which is a bit more mathsy, but, makes sense. In this particular case, the outcome comes to about 14 either way. And my Displacer Beasts rolled a 6, which is a big yikes. Deployed are none the wiser. The party don't know this though. If you roll low, just raise your eyebrows and jot something down on your paper and go, just sprinkle a little paranoia in there. Now this is a video, so I'm not going to take you through every single thing, but just to summarize what happened over the next few rounds. The Ranger checked south, total 20, they moved to B5. That was their third hour spent. The Displacers succeed on their second perception check, so they've got one of the 3 that they need. Then it's the party's turn, the Ranger rolls a 16 east, the party moves to C5. That was their 4th hour. The Displacers succeed on their second of 3. Those work with the same core mechanic loop that the first one we talked about did. This time, because the Ranger kept on top of the trail, none of the other party members have had to make a second roll. They haven't wasted any extra time. Now, during the 5th hour, the Ranger rolls an 8 on the dice, bringing their tracking total to 14 east. Now something slightly different happens. So I like to complicate it a little bit here. Keep it fresh. So the DC is 16. 16 is like certainty, you know what's going on. But a 14 isn't a bad roll either. So if your players roll between, say, a 12 and the target number, they glean information, they just aren't necessarily sure about it. The party have come to a rocky area where there's just less to go by. There are some markings on the trees southeast that could indicate that the big cats traded to traveling up in the canopy. They are very good climbers, they've got 6 legs. But also scouting a little further to the northeast, now there's a return to that undergrowth, which bears the signs of a semi-regularly traveled route through the greenery. You really don't have a strong inclination either way. Our party know that they're headed into the afternoon now, so even though sunset is still a ways off, they don't want to waste time unnecessarily. They take their chances and they head northeast. While the party are moving, the Displacer beasts take their turn and they roll a 15 on their perception check. That's 3 of 3. Now they've realized that they're being hunted, and starting on their next turn, they'll be able to begin some hunting of their own. Back to the party, they've stumbled across one of my secretly laid traps. You activated my trap card. Treat this like a regular trap, I would say. Maybe they'll spot it in time and avoid it, or maybe they'll get their legs stuck in like a bear trap. They'll have to break free or break the trap or, disarm it, whatever it is they do. Any of that stuff. Classic trap business. Hunting and tracking wise, the important information that's being gathered by entering this square is that the trail was probably trod by humans coming out to lay traps for the Displacers, not the Displacers themselves. Now the party could head back the way that they've come, having lost another hour, but this group are clever. They've recognized, based on their map that they're filling out, it looks like the Displacers were headed in a generally eastward direction anyway. So the party take a risk. They decide to try their luck and attempt to pick up the trail again from where they are. Looking east, the Ranger rolls a 24. Directly to the east of the party, they find signs of their quarry's passage. It was headed south to north till that point, but it must bend away from the northward trajectory after that. So the party move to E4. Now the Displacers can start their own hunt. Now the Pride can split up at the start of their turn. If they want to, they don't have to, and each group can move 1 square independently. If, at any time after dusk, the Displacers have 2 groups that both converge on the same square that the party is in, the Displacers will launch an ambush, surprising the party. For now though, these Displacers just split into 2 groups, trying to get themselves into advantageous positions where they won't be seen. Just for some spice, decide whether you want to keep rolling fake perception checks, maybe lull your players into a false sense of security, or don't roll and don't mention it and just see if they notice that something is different from the last time the Displacers took their turn. Why isn't she rolling? Why aren't you rolling? Aha, so now the player party suspect the beasts were moving north, but they aren't sure whether to try northwest or northeast. They already know that directly north of them isn't gonna help. The Ranger pulls out their good old survival check and rolls a 17. Towards the northeast, you find some animal excrement. It's about large enough, and once you identify that it contains some crushed bone fragments, you determine that you're on the right track. The party moves to F3. The timer is only into its 7th hour, and the Displacers want to hold off on attacking until they're at their strongest, which is the 10th hour and beyond. So for the next few rounds, they're gonna have to play cat and mouse, trying to avoid the players. Alpha group move to C1, but Beta group stay where they are. They're hoping to wrap around behind the party and catch them off guard. The Ranger rolls a 16. They get caught for a moment between 2 different trails, but having been misled earlier, they now know what signs to look for from the human trappers. Based on this, the Ranger thinks that the Displacer beasts must have deftly avoided the trap because their trail heads to the northwest. Displacer beast turn. Alpha group wants to lead the party away before doubling back to surprise them, so they move to B2. Beta group want to quietly follow in the party's wake, stalking them through the shadows. So they moved to F2. The Displacer Beast worked out where all the traps were ages ago, so they don't have to worry about making any trap checks. Now, remember that each square covers a large area, so the Displacer Beasts aren't quite close enough yet to have to start really making stealth checks. We join the player party again just as they walk into an area hot with the stench of flesh and blood. At first, you don't see it. This place is dark with the shadows of ancient trees. But the ranger probably knows where to look, or else the wizard feels something drip onto their shoulder from above. In the trees overhead, hooked into the forks of branches, are mutilated, half-eaten carcasses. The Displacers dragged them to where they could eat in peace. Now that you're looking for it, you can see where the claw marks dug into the trunk. Even with all that extra weight, the climb was easy with 6 powerful legs. One way or another, maybe the rogue can tell that the carcasses are fresh. The Displacers were here until very, very recently. They're close now. A check worth 25 to the west shows the distinctive track pattern of a 6-legged gate in the soft, impressionable soil, headed northwest. Despite the precision of this, the party decide to head due west instead, in the hopes that they'll be able to catch the Displacers if they divert their course to the south. They're short on time now and they need every advantage they can get. Beta Group moved to E2 while Alpha Group moved to C2. It's a risky move that puts them in the line of discovery, but the Displacers' earlier mislead didn't pan out, and the adventurers are catching up. The cats would rather launch their attack sooner than later. It's the 10th hour now. Once the players finish this turn, it will be dusk, and the Displacer's strength will come into play in the darkened jungle, just in time for them to take their turn. The players have to hope that they get the drop on the beasts now. Unbelievably, of all the rolls, the imaginary ranger that I've been rolling for rolled a 10 total on their survival check to the west. They've lost the trail. The rogue says they'll have a go in the same direction with a perception check, and they roll an 18. They notice a few things in succession. First, that it's a lot harder to see with the sun sinking away as it is. They hear a scatter of birds and monkeys suddenly taking flight, the monkeys metaphorically speaking. Then they spot a series of reflective yellow eyes hidden among the inky shadows of the jungle flora. It's too late! The Displacers on either side converge on the player's position in D2, and they get to attempt a surprise round. They all roll together for their stealth thing for the surprise round because it was a coordinated attack. So just like any surprise round, the stealth roll of the Displacers will be compared to the passive perception of the players. In this case, I would let the rogue choose the active perception roll that they just made if they wanted, and the ranger might have some stuff that would give them bonuses there, but that's it. The time is up. It's dusk, it's a surprise round, and combat is go! Okay, now that was a lot, but I really wanted to take you through the different kind of mechanics of it, particularly that overarching mechanical loop, give you an idea of the elements that make up the basis for any of these scenarios. This could have gone so many different ways. This was a pretty close call and ultimately bad luck for the players, but it's entirely possible that the players could have realized the ambush at the last minute. In that case, they would have been fighting at dusk still, but without the surprise round against them. In another reality, the Displacers might have gotten a run of crummy rolls and taken ages to realize that anyone was looking for them. Not notice the intruders until it was too late. The ranger might have natural explorer bonuses that let them work out that the Displacers have split up. In that case, they might know that an ambush is coming, or they might be checking behind them to make sure that they're not being followed. Maybe when the players located that second trap, they might have wanted to do something with it. Set up a tricksy trap ploy of their own. Maybe they would split up to do that. Maybe the party would have to fight while split up. Maybe each of the Displacer groups would have to fight while split up. There are so many variables that I haven't covered, but all of them have such juicy potential. So now, the actual combat. Let's talk about this. I've written my own Displacer Beast stat block. Knowing me, I probably haven't got a GM binder version of it written up at the time of upload, but also knowing me, I will probably do one at some point and add the link to the description. So if you're watching this a little further down the line, check the description. So now I already mentioned that I've shifted a lot of the stat block to reflect more of the panther than I did the actual Displacer Beast. Because let's be real, it's a panther with 6 legs and tentacles. I don't understand why so many of its stats are so much worse. Boring, boring, boring. Initiative +3, stealth, dark vision. Okay, I gave it an ability called Sprint. It recharges on a 6. Its movement becomes 60 feet, and it can dash as a bonus action for 1 round. I wanted to reflect the idea that, you know, if it was trying to keep pace with a horse for a long time, it probably couldn't, but in a short distance sprint, it could probably catch a horse. I gave it the keen smell, advantage on perception checks that use smell, because why didn't it have that? I also added something called Shadow Stalker. In darkness or dim light, the Displacer Beast doubles its proficiency bonus to stealth. It's already stealthy, but when it's dark, it gets even stealthier. It just blends right on into the jungle, and at night, whoo, you're gone. Defense, the AC remains 13. Hit points, I dropped the hit points to 22 because I think 85 hit points, which I think is what it is in the book, that's a lot. That feels like you're meant to be fighting just this thing, because as soon as you make it 2 Displacer Beasts or 3 Displacer Beasts, you're really, that's a lot of hit points to be contending with at the same time as taking damage. Action economy! And I want a whole pride of them, right? Displacement, the standard displacement thing. In this version, avoidance, which if you, try to hit a Displacer Beast with like a fireball or something that requires a saving throw to take half damage, it has the same as like evasion, because it's reflecting the idea that the Displacer Beast isn't quite where you think it is. In my version, it only gets avoidance if it's in dim lighting or darkness. I did not make this decision lightly. I gave the Displacer Beast so many things. Some things had to be limited to if it's fighting in darkness, because I want there to be a distinct difference between fighting during the day, you can kind of see what's going on, or fighting at night, you got no idea where it ends and where it begins. I also gave it an ability called Feline Grace that just means that it can't be knocked prone. Cats already can barely fall on their side, let alone one that's on 6 legs that's gonna be harder to push over. Now, offensive stuff. Here's the thing about the Displacer Beast. I don't understand why it's only cool things. For something that is written about as a deadly hunter to be feared, its only cool things are defensive. It doesn't even do anything cool with its tentacles. It doesn't even attack you with its claws. It just goes bat bat with its tentacles, and that's it. Not in my house. No thank you. No siree. Offense, I got the standard sort of big cat stuff, but a little amped up because, come on, make them deadly. If you promise deadly, make them deadly. Claws are pretty standard. It's got a bite attack that's pretty standard. It gets the pounce ability that a lot of big cats get. Its tentacles now are used for grappling. You know how a lot of big cats, when they're hunting, like they do the sprint, they leap up and they grab the animal by their neck, break their neck to paralyze them, and then they drag them away. I wanted a little bit of that. I wanted to give something cool to the tentacles. So now the tentacles, if they hit, they grapple. The Displacer Beast can drag you away to a tree. They don't break your neck. Unless you want them to break the player's necks. You can add that in if you want to. Seems a bit cutthroat to me, but I also added another thing that's pack tactics, but I called it pride tactics. So because they're now framed like cooperative lionesses on the hunt, they get pack tactics, but if they are in dim light or in darkness, the Displacer Beast gets pride tactics all on their lonesome, even if they're by themselves, because of that displacement, right? In the actual fluff, it says that it looks like they are a couple of feet away from where they actually are. So it's that idea that you're kind of guarding in a different place to where you're meant to be. The Displacer Beast takes advantage of that, and they literally get advantage. They take advantage on the attack. Only in darkness though, super dangerous in darkness. And I also kind of have toyed with the concept of like a frenzied mauling for whichever is the last beast standing. So the whole pride is being killed, there's one left. They get a super multi-attack, which is because they have 6 legs. I kind of did this because all the signature moves for Displacer Beasts kind of happen early or are passive throughout, and that doesn't make as much of an impression on players, so I needed to find a signature like attack moment. So it could be this, which is just like an uber multi-attack, frenzied mauling. They use 4 of their legs to cut them up. Slice, slice, slice. So they get 4 claw attacks and a bite attack, which is huge. I know it's huge, but it'll be dramatic though. So those are my thoughts on Displacer Beasts. I want it to really be sort of a patient, long-term hunt. I want it to really bring tracking to the fore and make it a significant thing. And I really want that vibe of hunter v hunted. You think you've got a lock on the Displacer Beast, and then they come at you from the side and you're like, clever girl, and then you don't die because you've got death in a sack. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hey, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I know. But there are 3 more in this series coming, and if you like this sort of thing, where you get sort of a deep dive on how I might run a specific monster, you don't want to miss them. Apart from that, I do believe that's it. I'm done. Email this to your grandma, and I'll see you some other time. wonder how long that video was. Felt like a long one.